July 29th, 2021, Joe Biden made an announcement that COVID-19 vaccinations will be mandatory for all civil federal workers. All federal workers will need to be vaccinated against the coronavirus or face regular testing, social distancing, mask requirements, and travel limits.
It's time to impose requirements on key groups to make sure they're vaccinated. Excuse me. Just this week, we took an important step to protect our veterans. Like many civilian hospital systems are doing, the Department of Veterans Affairs will now require COVID-19 vaccines for doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers who provide medical care for our veterans. Next, since many vaccinations are required for active duty military today, I'm asking the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID-19 to the list of vaccinations our armed forces must get. Our men and women in uniform who protect this country from grave threats should be protected as much as possible from getting COVID-19. Next, every federal government employee will be asked to attest to their vaccination status. Anyone who does not attest or is not vaccinated will be required to mask no matter where they work, test 1 or 2 times a week to see if they've acquired COVID, socially distance, and generally will not be allowed to travel for work. Likewise, today, I'm directing my administration to take steps to apply similar standards to all federal contractors. If you want to do business with the federal government, get your workers vaccinated.
Notice, Biden says it's time to impose requirements on key groups to make sure they are vaccinated. His cough after this statement is a veiled signal acknowledging the true targeted or key groups that this mandate is aimed at persecuting.
It's time to impose requirements on key groups to make sure they're vaccinated. Excuse me.
Over a year ago, I posted an article concerning an emergency court order that was issued in March 2020 by Florida Chief Justice Raul Zambrano. The court order included sections that dealt with violations of quarantine or isolation orders, violations of orders to limit travel, violations of orders to close public or private buildings, seizure of bodily fluids, and mandatory vaccination proceedings. It should be noted that no vaccine was even available in March of 2020. I said then that this emergency court order confirmed our suspicions that the plan for the future was to implement forced vaccinations on the public. Mandatory testing and vaccinations, as well as forced quarantine and isolation or restrictions of travel for those who refuse to be crowned by the venom of the serpent, simply put, is imprisonment and violates human rights. This proves that from the outset, this was the plan all along, and they have been lying to the people from the beginning. Back in December 2020, Joe Biden said he didn't think vaccines should be mandatory.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide. I'll do everything in my power as President of the United States to encourage people to do the right thing, and when they do it, demonstrate that it matters.
How hypocritical of him then to do an about-face and now make vaccines mandatory.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory. It's time to impose requirements on key groups to make sure they're vaccinated.
This same sentiment was echoed in the UK by Boris Johnson back in December 2020 as well.
The Pfizer vaccine is coming to the UK. Soon it'll be heading to other countries too, and a huge operation is underway.
Through 2021, will provide 1.3 billion doses.
And while many people want this as soon as possible, some are asking, do I have to be vaccinated? Well, let's be absolutely clear. The answer in the UK is no.
I strongly urge people to take up the vaccine, but it is no part of our culture or our ambition in this country to make vaccines mandatory. That's not how we do things. I strongly urge people to take up the vaccine, but it is no part of our culture or our ambition in this country to make vaccines mandatory. That's not how we do things.
By the end of September, when all over 18s will have had their chance to be double jabbed, we're planning to make full vaccination the condition of entry to nightclubs and other venues where large crowds gather. Proof of a negative test will no longer be enough.
They are also pushing for mandatory vaccinations for enlisted military.
68.8% of the 1.4 million members of the active duty U.S. military have received at least one dose of the Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccines. Until now, participation among the troops has been voluntary, but that could change.
Should the FDA approve it, then I am certain that Pentagon leadership will take a look at what our options are going forward, including the potential option of making mandatory.
Several cities are also gearing up to force their employees to get the shot.
Tonight, San Francisco has put the word out to its 35,000 employees. Once the COVID-19 vaccines are fully approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the clock starts ticking down to mandatory vaccination. Those who refuse to do so could be terminated.
This is not just happening here in America, but all over the world. Here's a report from France.
Some of the major announcements. France will be under a state of health emergency. This comes as the level of vaccination remains low and hospitals continue to be under pressure. Vaccination is now mandatory for healthcare workers and non-medical staff in hospitals, clinics, care homes, homes for handicapped people, all professionals and volunteers who closely work with the elderly population. Macron has urged all French people to get jabbed at the earliest. A health pass will be issued for places of leisure, including restaurants, cafes, malls, and cultural venues. It is mandatory to show the vaccination proof or a negative COVID-19 report to access shows, amusement parks, concerts, and festivals.
Here's another report from Italy concerning mandatory vaccines.
You're looking at Rome, Italy, where the government is now mandating all healthcare workers receive a COVID-19 vaccine. The move is believed to be the first of its kind in Europe, and it sparked controversy.
Notice Biden also made mentions of the NFL in their practices concerning COVID-19 vaccination.
I also commend the National Football League. It has announced that if there are outbreaks among unvaccinated players and personnel, then the team risks forfeiting games. I urge other sport leagues at every level to take every step they can.
The NFL is a reference to the Nephilim giants that corrupted human DNA by taking wives of human women and bearing children with them. This can be found in Genesis 6:4, which declares, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown."